Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about my Winter TBR and how I actually fared with it. So we will talk about some stats and then I will go through the books that were on my Winter TBR and let you know whether I've read them or not. Now, if you have been watching my vlogs, you might have seen that I did have quite a few health struggles this first quarter of the year. It started in January where it was really bad, and then February it also wasn't great. And then in March I started to slowly feel better, luckily. So this will also be reflected in my reading, but that's just something, you can't really change. It gets you when it gets you. But let's talk about the numbers. So to read my TBR, I had about 6 TBR books a month. I did like little lists for each month to see how many books I've read. So in January, I had 6 books on my TBR for the month to read, and out of these 6 books, I started 1 and finished none. So 0% of my reading in January was my actual TBR books, which was not a great start, but I was majorly relying on audiobooks in January just because I couldn't focus on reading physically, as I said, because of my health. And then I also had 2 books checked out from the library, and I started both of those but only finished 1, so 20% of my reading in January was library books. Now moving on to February, I had 6 books again on my TBR to read, and as I said, in February I was starting to feel a bit better, so I started 3 books and finished those 3 books in February, and I also finished the 1 book that I had started in January from my TBR. So overall, 50% of my reading in February were TBR books, which is kind of where I want to be, 50 or over, so already much better than in January. And then in February, I didn't have any new books checked out from the library, but I finished the 1 I had started in January as well. And so 12% of my reading in February were library books. Last but not least, we're going into March, and just because I do have some priority reads I didn't get to, I had more books on my TBR for March. I put down 8 books I really wanted to read before this first quarter was over, and out of these 8 books I started 5 and I also finished 5, so that was the most successful yet. And I also had 2 books checked out from the library. And out of those 2 books, I started and finished both of them. So that means that in March, again, 50% of my reading were from my TBR and 20% were library books. And that is kind of like my optimum. That is where I want to be numbers wise. So I'm quite happy that for February and March I did achieve the kind of percentages that I would like to see for my TBR reduction plans. Now obviously the other percentages of those books are audiobooks that I buy new. I do not have a backlist of audiobooks, so those I immediately get to and read, so that's fine by me. So now that we talked about the numbers, let's get into the books and see which ones I actually got around to reading. 2 books I do not have here. One of those was an audiobook, but that one was for my trying new authors this year, and that was The Changeling by Victor LaValle, which I have read. The other new author's book I had was Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin, which I've also read. Then for my series reading I want to do this year, I wanted to read the Southern Reach trilogy. So this is Annihilation, Authority and Acceptance by Jeff Vandermeer, and I have read all of these. And now the rest of these books are just books that I physically owned and I wanted to read. Gingerbread by Helen Oyeyemi I have read and really enjoyed. Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings I have read and really enjoyed. All Violent Ends by Chloe Gong I have read and enjoyed. Now we're getting to the books I have not read. We have Afterlives by Abdulrazak Gurna, and this one I have not read and it will stay on my TBR probably for next year. So 3 of Thorn by Margaret Rogerson I have not read and it will stay on my TBR probably for next year as well. Then we have Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. This is one that really pains me, but I still haven't read it and it will stay on my TBR. A German book, Die Unglückseligen by Thea Dorn, and again have not read this one and it will stay on the TBR, probably for next year. Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll, staying on the TBR for a little while longer. The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo will also stay on my TBR for a little bit longer. The God of Lost Words by A.J. Hackworth. This I have not read, but I hope to still read it this year. And then The Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. This one I have also not read, but it is on my April TBR because I need it for the Magical Readathon, so this will get read in April. So overall, this first quarter was less successful than I was hoping for, but taking into consideration how poorly I've been for most of this time, I'm still pretty happy with the amount of books that I managed to read, and I'm very optimistic that my spring TBR for the second quarter will go much better. I have already uploaded that TBR if you want to check it out, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!